Welcome to the Spot On Insurance podcast, brought to you by Insurance Licensing Services of America, ILSA. This is Ted Tavares.
And this is Arlene Tavares coming to you from gorgeous Puerto Rico. Today, we'll be inviting our ILSA experts to share their knowledge.
But before we get started, don't forget to click on the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And now here's our host, Doug Foresta.
Welcome to another episode of Spot On Insurance. This is your host, Doug Foresta. I want to remind you, as always, visit iTunes and subscribe to the podcast. You can search for Spot On Insurance and make sure you don't miss any episodes. My guest today is Stefanie Cantu. She is a supervisor in ILSA's Licensing and Compliance Department. We're going to be talking about some licensing types. These are maybe some licenses that are a little more specialized, and I'm very excited about that. I'll say a little bit about Stefanie. We'll bring her right on. Stefanie Cantu is a supervisor in ILSA's Licensing Compliance Department. She joined the intake team at ILSA in 2008. After that, her impressive skills led her to relocation to the renewals team. She excelled in that role and then soon was asked to join the licensing team. And following the merge of intake, licensing, and renewals, she was a natural to step into the position of team leader and now supervisor. And she is the go-to person for complex compliance questions. Stefanie Cantu, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, today we're going to talk about some other types of licenses, explain what they are, what it requires to get them. Let's start with the first one, which is third-party administrator license. Can you explain what this license is?
Sure. So a third-party administrator, short for that is TPA. And that's what a lot of our clients know it as or reference it as when they come to us and let us know that they need it. So a third-party administrator, it processes insurance claims and certain other components of employees' benefit plans. They can also provide underwriting, customer service, and similar services for insurance companies or self-insured entities.
So can you explain who would need a third-party administrator license? Who or what kind of entity?
Sure. It all depends on the type of structure that your entity and you are set up and how you're writing business and what type of business you're trying to cover. So anyone that fits this definition of what a TPA is would need to be licensed wherever it's offered, because it is one of those complex licenses. It's not something that every state acknowledges or even offers. So that's where they'll come to us and just let us know, hey, we're writing this type of business. I know that it's covered under a TPA, but it's not offered in, X amount of states. So in lieu of that, what can we get to make sure that we're compliant? And that's, again, where we kind of step in and assist with that and lead them to the right direction and make sure that they are compliant by getting them what it is that they need.
So it's not something that's required in every state. That's what I heard you say. So I would probably have to get some advice about whether it's necessary in the state that I'm practicing in. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Every state, as you know, has different rules and regulations. Some states don't even offer a TPA license, but in lieu of that, they would have to get something else just to make sure that they are, being covered.
Okay.
The proper way, just remaining in compliance. So, again, a lot of that stuff, it has to do with research and figuring out exactly what that state's requirement is. And a lot of these, individuals that come to us, they don't have the time or desire to do that kind of research. They kind of just let us know, hey, we need to be covered in these 5 states, whatever it takes to get it, get it for us. And that's where we'll, jump in and figure all that requirement out and let them know and get the project started for them.
Yes, I could definitely see the benefit in that versus trying to do this yourself. Let's go on to the next license, which is managing general agent license. So can you explain this license and who would need it?
So if you or your entity supervises local agency and field operations for an insurance company, or you're authorized by an insurance company to receive and process policies sold for that insurance company by other agents, then this type of license, a managing general agent, which is short for that is MGA. That's the type of license that you would need to make sure that you are, handling your business properly.
And is this something that exists in every state, or is it, again, only in certain states?
Yeah, because it's just like TPAs where it's complex and has different variables. It's not necessarily offered in every state, but there are other things that you can get in that place just to make sure that you're covered for that specific state's requirements.
So that's a very good point, right? So just because, let's say, maybe there isn't an MGA in my state doesn't mean that I'm scot-free and I don't have to get any type of license for the activity I'm doing. There's probably another type of license that I need to get to cover that activity. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, sir. And another thing, too, I guess a little special tidbit about MGAs is sometimes clients will come to us thinking, okay, the definition of an MGA suits me, suits my company, so I know that that's what I need. But after looking into it some more and getting information from them, we end up finding out that that's not actually the case. They don't necessarily meet the criteria to qualify for that type of license because the different states have different requirements that you have to meet in order to even be allowed to get that type of license. So again, a lot of research and, digging in and finding out exactly if that suits them or if that's, not actually what they're needing. So the requirements and what they actually end up getting kind of vary state by state and also dependent on, how much business that they're doing and exactly how they're set up.
I want to also take a step back before we move on to the next type of license. I want to take a step back and just also ask you a question about the timetable for getting these sorts of licenses. And can you say a little bit about, I assume these are not the types of things where you fill out a couple of papers and then, 2 days later you get this license. What is the general timetable for being able to get licensed, as a TPA or an MGA?
Yeah, that's a really good question because, again, that's where a lot of the misunderstanding comes from our clients. They think that, because they got their producer license so quickly, then surely they can get a TPA and MGA license that fast. And unfortunately, that's not the case. These types of licenses, for the most part, are not even offered electronically. So it's all done by paper. Not only the application itself, but all of the additional requirements that go with it. And because the states ask for so much documentation, it can take weeks or even months to get licenses issued. So that's one thing that we try to tell our clients up front. If you think that there's a possibility, in the next 6 months or so that you might be needing a license of this type in a particular state, you might want to consider starting that project way in ahead of time. That way, by the time it comes to you actually needing that license, hopefully by then it'll be in place. It's just, again, because of these types of licenses and all the stuff that the states require, it's just one of those that's going to take a really long time to get issued, or potentially could take a long time to get issued.
All right. So very important point. Give yourself enough time, right? I'm sure you must have people. I'm sure you must have people who come to you and say, "I need this done by next week."
Oh yeah. Oh, yes, and I don't know whether to giggle or cry, but definitely we have to tell them up front, and we're very honest with our clients and let them know, I know the importance of this, but unfortunately, because of all the requirements and the way that we have to go about getting that's just not going to happen. The states don't offer expediting, and it's at that point, the ball's in the state's court, and we kind of just have to wait it out and figure out, how long it's going to take for them to even look at that application. But yeah, we definitely try to express that to our clients and try to let them know ahead of time. If you know that this is a possibility, then you might want to start thinking about it way ahead of time.
Spot On Insurance is sponsored by ILSA, Insurance Licensing Services of America, America's premier licensing and regulatory compliance experts. To learn more about ILSA and the services they provide, visit ilsainc.com.
You also mentioned requirements, and that was going to be a follow-up to that question about time, which is what kinds of requirements are there? I know we were chatting a little bit before this episode, and you had mentioned that these more specialized types of licenses can be more involved than getting, let's say, a producer's license. What should I be prepared to I guess, to produce in order to get these licenses? What are some of the requirements?
Sure. So some of the requirements that we'll need to send in with the application before the state will even issue it is, copies of their articles of incorporation, copies of their bylaws, audited financials in some cases. Sometimes states will ask for a detailed description of exactly what type of service you're going to be offering. And for most, if not all states, they also ask for biographical affidavits for each officer of that company, along with background checks. So it's definitely a lot more to get these types of licenses. There's a lot more involved and a lot more required to submit to the state before they'll even look at your application.
So again, not only do you have to add in the time it takes for them to go over your application, but I imagine the background checks themselves probably take some time, right? For that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Great stuff. So let's go on to limited line license. And can you say a little bit about what that is? And again, what kind of activity would I be doing that I would need a limited line license?
So with limited lines, it kind of, in a sense, goes hand in hand with the producer license, except the only thing is with the limited lines license, it covers the extra lines of authority that are not, falling underneath the main lines of authority. So, as a producer, you can hold a property and casualty license or a life accident health license, or sometimes both, but the limited lines might not be covered in that state under that particular license. Some of them, they do, cover it. Sometimes they don't. So the different types of limited lines that I'm talking about is like the car rental, the credit, the crop insurance, the surety, the travel. Some states, it rolls underneath, if you hold property and casualty, then you automatically hold surety as well. But that's not always the case. The main one that we kind of see a lot of here recently is the credit lines of authority. It's actually a separate license in itself in some states. So again, that's where clients will come to us and tell us, hey, can you do the research for us? Tell us, what states does credit fall under what we already hold, or do we need to hold a separate license? And that's where we'll assist with getting them what they need as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway, from our conversation. Is one of the things I hope people take away is sounds like it really does vary state to state. So you can't extrapolate just from one state to what you'll need in another one.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, that's an issue that we face a lot with our clients is they'll, think because credit falls under, property and casualty in one state, then it must be like that everywhere else. And that's not actually the case. And we'll have to go out there and apply for that separate line to make sure that they are covered in that, other state.
Thank you. So how about a risk purchasing group, risk retention group license? Can you explain that?
Sure. So a risk purchasing group or a risk retention group, short for that is RPG and RRG. Those are the types of license that allows any group or similar businesses that share common risk characteristics to kind of come together to purchase liability insurance. Risk purchasing groups, RPGs, purchase liability coverages from insurance carriers, where RRGs, risk retention groups, provide liability insurance and are treated as insurance companies. Again, it's one of those complex license types, but if this definition, fits what the type of business that you're trying to do or that you're thinking about doing, then that's where you would come to us and ask us to assist you in getting those types of licenses. They, again, vary state by state, the requirements along with whether they're even offered. So it's just something that we assist with getting you exactly what it is that you need.
So they're not necessarily risk purchasing group or risk retention group are not necessarily offered in every state?
Right. And they're actually only available to agencies. As an individual, you could not get an RPG license. It's a type of license that's only offered to agencies because of the way that it's meant to be structured. So agencies are the only ones that it's offered to, and again, not in every state. So,
so let me ask you this.
Sure.
When it comes to these specialty types licenses, what are some of the biggest stumbling blocks that you see that clients have when it comes to these more kind of maybe specialized in lesser known licenses?
Sure. So, being in the licensing department for all these years, I've definitely have my fair share of seeing different instances or different experiences with these complex licenses. And it seems to be, the biggest issue or the biggest hurdle that we've had to help our clients get past is all this additional documentation that's needed.
Right.
Again, they're used to the producer licenses where you can go online, apply for it, and it gets issued fairly quickly as long as there's no background issues. But then when it comes to these, more complex licenses, they kind of get a little bit overwhelmed because there's just so much that is involved with it. There's a state, and I remember preparing my very first one that it had to be sent in a binder, in a 3-ring binder. The application did. It had to be labeled with tabs. It had to be, in there the proper way, because if there was just one page off or one page missing, they were going to send the whole thing back. So that's, I think, what's the biggest issue that agencies and individuals come across is just that extra documentation and extra requirements that goes with these types of license, that they feel like it's best and well worth having us do deal with all the headache part of it so that they don't even have to worry about it. I think that's what, it seems to be most beneficial for ILSA to jump in and to assist, taking that monkey off their back and just kind of, telling them, you worry about writing the policies and let us worry about the tough stuff. Let us worry about the gathering all this stuff together and sending it to the state and following up with the state, because that's another issue too, is we've had clients come to us and say, hey, I was in the middle of this application and I can't get anybody to contact me from the state. I don't know where we're at with it. And so they'll come to us midway of their project and ask us to kind of try to finalize it for them. And that's just the thing is, when you call the state to get a status on your application, you can't call the normal producer licensing section. You have to, kind of be transferred a couple times to get to the right person to assist you with exactly what it is that you're trying to find out. But again, that's where we come in. We are able to take that headache away from you and help get that license issued as quickly as possible without any further delays, with the process.
And, finally, I think that's great because exactly, I think when people hear this and they realize how many variables there are, you can see why it makes sense to have an expert help you with this. But what would you say to agents or, listeners who say, boy, this is a lot of work, to fill out these things and do these background checks. Is it worth it for me to get licensed in that other state, in one of these more specialized licenses? What would you say to someone who is, kind of on the fence about, should I really get licensed in additional states?
Yeah, definitely. And we've had that before. We've had conference calls with our clients up front to get them to, let us know exactly where they're at and what they're thinking. And I try to always tell them, think about the big picture and think about the long run. Weigh out your options and figure out, are you capable of making hefty commissions off of this type of license in this particular state? Because if the answer is yes, then to me it's a no-brainer. It might seem like a lot of money up front to get that license, or a lot of requirements up front to get that license issued, but in the long run, is it going to be beneficial? Do the pros outweigh the cons? And we just reassure them, that's what we're here for, is to assist you in making the right choice and to assist you in getting that license issued. So really the only thing that I put back on them is just think about whether the, commissions is better or worth getting this type of license. And most of the case, they'll think about it and they'll say, you know what, you're absolutely right. It might be a headache now, but in the long run, once it gets issued and we're able to write off all those types of policies and get that commission, it's going to be well worth it. So that's one thing I try to always tell them.
It really becomes an investment in their business, ultimately, it sounds like.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
My guest today has been Stefanie Cantu, the supervisor at ILSA's Licensing and Compliance Department. As always, I encourage you to visit ilsainc.com. And Stefanie, if people want to reach you directly, they're listening to this and going, boy, I could really use her help with the work I'm doing. What's the best way for them to reach you?
You can give me a call at 254-729-69 6139. And you can also email me at scantu@ilsainc.com.
Stefanie Cantu, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
Thank you.
By the way, our show notes and bonus resources can be found on spotoninsurance.com. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single episode.
Thanks for joining us.